Shalom, and welcome to another episode of the School of Innovation. I'm your host, Yaniv Korem, and my guest today is Luuk Eliens. Luuk is the Chief Commercial Officer at Xnode, a Chinese global platform for innovation on a mission to help entrepreneurs and innovators build companies with a positive global impact. Luuk is a business leader and entrepreneur with a demonstrated track record in innovation and technology across multiple industries and continents. His vast experience in innovation from inception to product launch has helped him guide hundreds of startups and corporate clients to growth and investment. On a daily basis, Luuk and his team apply and disseminate knowledge on customer development, lean startup, and venture building. Luuk helped build new ventures in industries including enterprise software, medtech, new retail, automotive, and fintech. Here's my chat with Luuk. Hello, Luuk, and welcome to the show.
Hi, Yaniv. Thanks for having me.
What I thought we could do today is talk a little bit about your role. You're the Chief Commercial Officer at Xnode. I'm curious, how would you describe that role?
Yeah, so this is actually a role I took up fairly recently. So in all fairness, I'm also still discovering it. But in that role, essentially, I'm responsible for all business at Xnode. In our case, that means that I run our innovation community, our co-working spaces, our corporate innovation practice, our scale-up practice, as well as our foreign offices. All the parts of the business that are directly revenue generating and that are directly kind of contributing to the P&L of the company.
So what was your role before?
Yeah, so within Xnode specifically, I joined the company 2.5 years ago. Initially, I came on board to set up the corporate innovation practice. So at the time, this was in 2017, Xnode didn't really have a proper corporate innovation practice where they were actually serving corporate innovation clients leading to business impact. So I set that up at the time. And then I changed last year to being responsible for all innovation. So not just corporate innovation, but also all the activities we do for startups and scale-ups, as well as universities, government and VCs. And then this year, I took on as well our community, our space, and then the foreign offices. So it's kind of a gradual increase in responsibility over time.
That's amazing. And are you doing all of that by yourself, or do you have a team?
No. I would be nothing without the team. So right now, at least my team is approximately 30 people, spread out over Singapore and Shanghai offices, and soon as well our Shenzhen office. And it's divided in those different units. So actually the direct persons that I'm working with are our head of community, our head of corporate innovation, our head of startup and scale up, as well as our head of marketing and growth. So those are the people that directly report to me, and then of course they have their own teams that they're working with.
Give me a sense of who's on the team, what's their background?
Yeah, so maybe before I answer that question, maybe let me give you a bit of context. So the way we're trying to build our company and the way we're also trying to build company culture. So we are a Chinese privately owned company with a distinct focus on cross-border innovation. So why am I emphasizing private? Because obviously in China, and that goes for all industries, but also specifically for innovation, lots of incubators or accelerators or innovation platforms are actually to a large extent driven by government. We are private, and that makes the profile of our company slightly different. And at the same time, we have a passion and a goal to bridge China with the rest of the world. Mm-hmm. So that needs to translate back to the people that we have in the organization, as well as the culture that we're trying to build. So if you look at the team, right now we have a mixture of about, I think, 80-20 Chinese versus international. So 80% of the people in my team are Chinese, 20% are from different countries from all over the world. So I think that's quite a nice mix. Mm-hmm. At the same time, most of the Chinese colleagues have studied abroad or have been abroad for a quite extensive period of their lives, meaning they speak fluent English, they understand Western culture, so they can bridge the gap also culturally between the West and China. Now, and how are we trying to, if you look at the people that we're looking for in general, we're looking for people that have entrepreneurial experience. So ideally people that have tried to start a company, people that have started a company before, people that have been part of a startup. So they actually understand what it means to create something from scratch. And at the same time, of course, since building a company means being a jack of all trades, we're looking for specific vertical expertise areas. So some people need to have really a deep understanding of raising venture capital. Some people need to have a really deep understanding of lean startup. Some people need to have a really deep understanding of prototyping or design thinking. And by having that vertical expertise on an individual basis, as a team, you cover kind of all the skill sets that are necessary to help startup companies to grow.
Interesting. So how do you manage the dynamics within the team? Like you mentioned culture, company culture, and I'm always curious about that. Give me some tactics about how you do that. How do you build culture? How do you manage the dynamics in the team?
Yeah, so I think by no means do I want to claim that I have it all figured out. It's a daily learning curve, and I'm making mistakes on daily basis. But there's a couple of things that at least we're trying to do. So we're trying to build a culture that's based on honesty, integrity. Those are a couple of the central values that we're trying to adhere to in the company. And especially in China, this is quite unique. Typically in China, companies are very top-down, very hierarchical. Whatever the CEO says gets done. No room for upward feedback, no room for initiative, no room for proactiveness. Yeah. We're trying to counter that. The philosophy behind it as well is that if you look at the new generation of Chinese millennials, they actually need that. They need room for self-development and room for taking initiative. So we feel that's a way also to attract talent. And the way to do that, or at least the way I'm trying to do that within my role within our organization, is to, of course, set the direction, right? So what are we trying to achieve as a company? Where do we want to be 3 to 5 years from now? Also make clear what the red lines are. What are the things that we absolutely do not want to be? What's the behavior that we absolutely do not want to behave like? And with those red lines, as well as the long-term goal in mind, my main job is, or at least I'm trying to let go as much as possible, give people the freedom and the autonomy to then fill in what that means for their individual goals, and of course be there to guide them at the moment they have questions or at the moment they want to brainstorm. But other than that, as much as possible, try to get out of the way. If you would ask people in my team, I'm sure people will say that sometimes I'm still too much involved in the nitty-gritty, and that's true. It's also for me. I'm trying to transition away from leading a small team towards a bigger team, and that's my own personal kind of learning curve.
Yeah, it's hard to let go. Definitely, it's hard to let go.
Yeah.
Give me a better sense of what it is that you guys do, on a daily basis or a typical week.
So let me first just a couple sentences on at least the type of company we're trying to build. So I mentioned already in the beginning, the entire idea behind Xnode is building a Chinese global platform for innovation. So we want to work with entrepreneurs, innovators, corporates, VCs, students, universities, any type of entity that can add value to creating new innovation that can hopefully improve the world a little bit. We want to work with all of those different stakeholders. And then specifically, we want to do that cross-border. So bringing Chinese companies and entrepreneurs out of China, bringing startups and scale-ups from outside of China inside of China. Okay. That's the purpose of our company. And ultimately, if we do that well, we hope that we can help entrepreneurs and innovators build companies globally that hopefully improve the world a little bit. So that's let's say the reason of existence. Now, if you trim that back a little bit to the day-to-day, so I mentioned before, I think the best way to understand our business, there's community. So we have a co-working space where we have many different startups and scale-ups that we host and that we try to support on a daily basis with all the needs that they might have when it comes to growing a company. So that's the first part, community. Second part is services. So supporting corporate partners, supporting scale-up companies in building new products, investing in companies, in some cases creating spin-outs for corporations. So there's many different activities that fall under the services branch. And then the third branch would be venture building. So that means taking equity stakes in companies and actually investing in them and helping them grow. So those are the three kind of big pillars of the business. Now, what does that look like on a day-to-day basis? It looks most of the days like total chaos, running from meeting to meeting, trying to keep on top of everything that's coming our way. Frankly speaking, that's the reality. So there's a lot of business development going on. We do a lot of coaching. We have a lot of workshops, lots of events, lots of interactions with people that come through our space. So it's very dynamic. At the same time, can be tiring sometimes.
Yeah. How do you manage that complexity? I mean, do you have like a specific tool or a set of tools? Is it certain people? Is it certain processes? How do you manage all that complexity?
Yeah. So for me personally, what I do, but that's my personal habit, and I think that's many people that have shared this or that do this as well. Every day when I come into the office, I take about let's say 20 minutes or however long I need, where I just highlight the 5 things I really want to get done today, and I try to focus on those. I'm not the type of guy that utilizes, has full crazy tool chain of Evernote or Todoist or whatever tools that people use. That doesn't really work for me for some reason. But at least taking 20 minutes a day to really try to make sure, what am I focusing on today? What needs to get done today? That works for me. And then normally in the weekend, typically on Sunday, I take at least an hour to step back for a second and to try to see, are we doing what we need to be doing to get where we want to be 1 or 2 years from now?
How are you measuring like the impact that you're making?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways in which we try to measure that, at least. So with the different ventures that we've invested in, not only in China but also in different parts of the world, we try to look at things like to what extent have we managed to contribute to the sustainable development goals of the UN. So things like decreasing poverty, combating climate change, increasing education. There's actually, those are things you can measure. And we've invested in companies that really try to do a couple of quite significant things in those areas. For example, we created a company 1 year ago that looks at how can we decrease the energy bill of data centers and how can we cut that energy bill in half. So that's one way. Then there's also a couple more kind of down-to-earth business metrics. So of course, we measure things like revenue, we measure profitability, we measure growth. In the end, we are a business and we need to make money, right?
Of course.
So when we run our programs, we ask people to what extent they feel their life has changed through our program.
Wow.
We do that again, not only after the program, but also 1 year afterwards, if they still feel that way. We try to measure things like general things. How many companies did we help create? How many jobs did we help create? So it's a mixture of more economic and in certain cases also monetary metrics, but also more impact-driven metrics.
I like that. So I want to take you back even further. Like, what were you doing before you got to China? Like, how long have you been living in China, and what were you doing before that?
So I've been in China now since June 2017. So that's about 2.5 years more or less. So my personal background, actually, I was 17. I still remember very well. I was 17, standing on a birthday party with my best friend. We were having a casual conversation over a couple of beers, and we came up with an idea to start a company. And then we decided on the spot that we were just going to start the company because we were young, we were brash, and we thought we would change the world.
And you were drinking beer.
Yes, and the drinking beer part didn't change. Actually, nothing changed in that regard. But so we started, and since then, so that was when I was 17. I'm 30 now, so that's 13 years ago. Since then, I kind of embarked on this journey of entrepreneurship. So I started 3 companies over the course of the last 10 years. 2 of them failed miserably. One of them became a modest success. So learned a lot from that journey. Then for a while, I was working for Ernst & Young, big accountancy firm. They asked me to help them set up an internal program for innovation so they could create internal spin-outs. So I did that for a while. And from there, I got recruited by a Dutch company called Xnode-HiTechXL, which is one of the leading accelerators in Europe. They, at the time, were looking at expanding to China. They headhunted me with the question if I wanted to lead their China expansion, which at the time sounded like a perfect, interesting adventure. So I said yes without knowing what I exactly would say yes to, and that's how I ended up in China.
I feel like a lot of people end up in China like that.
Yeah, and then they plan to stay for 2 years, but they never leave.
Exactly, right? I think to a certain extent, it's great that you don't know what you're up against. when someone,
Absolutely.
right? When someone gives you that opportunity.
Yeah, and at the same time, it's like once you enter China, it's almost like you enter this funnel of opportunity, which is stressful and makes people anxious all the time. But at the same time, it's addicting. There's so many new impulses, so many new people, so many things to learn here that once you get used to the rhythm, it's quite hard to readapt back to a more normal lifestyle.
Yeah. So when did you join HiTechXL? When was that?
So I joined in June 2017, and I was I think 3 days in the office in the Netherlands, and then I was on a plane to China.
Wow, that's crazy. Tell me a little bit about HiTechXL. What is it?
Yeah, so HiTechXL is a company from the Eindhoven region. Eindhoven is a small town from the Netherlands. It's the city where Philips got born, and that region is traditionally very strong in high-tech hardware-related innovation.
Mm.
So companies like Philips and ASML all originate from the region, and they have a very, very strong ecosystem in that area. So HiTechXL got founded in 2015 with the specific mandate of creating and attracting high-tech hardware startup companies and technologies to the region to strengthen the local ecosystem. So that was in 2015. The company exists now for 5 years. We've invested in approximately 60 companies by now, all in the high-tech hardware area. And recently we made a shift where instead of only accelerating startup companies, we're working now with leading research institutes all across Europe. And we take very sophisticated advanced technologies and we create companies out of that. So we don't start from scouting startups, but we start from scouting technologies. We add talent to the equation, then we create companies. So that's what HiTechXL does, creating companies around the area of high-tech hardware, also with a focus on creating impact, hopefully globally. And if you want to do that globally, you need to have a global footprint, which is why at the time HiTechXL decided to expand to China.
One of the first lessons I learned when I started working with China is that you can't operate as a Western company, you can't operate in China without a Chinese partner. So is that the relationship between HiTechXL and Xnode? Like, tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it's exactly like that. So at the time, very much in accordance with this philosophy, what HiTechXL did is they went around the ecosystem in Shanghai, trying to understand what other incubators and accelerators are out there, and could we potentially work with them. So we went around, and the only company that we really liked was Xnode. Again, because Xnode is private, meaning the dynamics are that you need to make money and that you really need to serve your clients rather than being too much forced to think purely about government-related incentives. So with that dynamic, we felt there was a clear connection. Xnode at the time was primarily a co-working space, but wanted to go into the area of innovation. HiTechXL had that capability. So it was a perfect match made in heaven between Xnode having local network and brand, and HiTechXL having the knowledge to convert Xnode into an innovation company.
Okay, so I'm putting myself in your shoes for a second. It's June 2017, and you just landed in China. There's this, relatively new, I guess, relationship between HiTechXL and Xnode, and you're smack in the middle of that.
You're
Right?
completely right.
Okay, so that to me spells like a lot of work, first and foremost, but also a lot of complexity. So tell me a little bit about that. Like, what was your role in, I guess, establishing or strengthening or growing that relationship between the two companies?
Yeah, this was an extremely interesting journey. And maybe for context, at the time also as HiTechXL, we had one leading customer that wanted to do business with us in Shanghai, which was Philips. So it was good because, of course, it gave HiTechXL a kind of card we could put on the table to make the collaboration with Xnode work. We had a client that we could bring in. Now, in terms of building the relationship, I think we did a couple of things really well. So what we didn't do, and this is very much a practice that in Europe, in the US, and probably also in Israel, people are not used to. But what we didn't do is start immediately working out some type of contractual agreement. Because we felt in any case, there's not enough relationship yet to put anything on paper. Even if we would put anything on paper, when it comes down to it, we're never going to start a lawsuit in China anyway. So
Right.
let's just start working together on the basis and the premise of trust, and start executing things, start delivering value, and then from there, hopefully, we can make things work. So that's
Wow.
actually how we did it. We started working together purely on a basis of trust, where both parties would bring in a knowledge, network, people, no contract whatsoever.
Hmm.
We just agreed that we would share cost and revenue based on a handshake. And that's from there we developed the relationship.
Wow. That's incredible. That's one huge leap of faith, I would say.
I'm not sure if that's true, because
Really?
I think very often, specifically in Chinese context, you can try to establish contracts, joint ventures, make it all complicated from a legal perspective.
Yeah.
But even that's a leap of faith. Ultimately, the relationship is much more valuable and trustworthy than any type of contract. So I think if we would have done it the other way around, we would not have the relationship and the business that we have today.
Yeah. The fact that HiTechXL put a guy, a professional on the ground, I think that sent a message, right? That really helped to solidify the trust between the two parties.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, also, again, in all honesty, it was not always easy. I'm still a relatively young guy. It took me really some time to also gain the credibility. But for sure, the fact that I was there and that we were willing to put our money where our mouth was, of course, helped a lot. And as Guus, the founder of HiTechXL, he has this saying where he always says, we say what we do and we do what we say. And
That's Dr. Seuss.
Yeah, we don't compromise on that. And actually it worked very well, because it showed towards Xnode at the time that we're serious about this. We trust you. We're going to do this together. We're in this together as brothers. And then, of course, this was fully kind of met by commitments that Xnode made at the time. And Xnode also showed full integrity in building up that relationship together.
Okay, I wanna shift gears a bit and talk about innovation in China. You know, when I started talking to people here in Israel, for example, about innovation in China, people raised an eyebrow, right? It's like when you think about innovation in China, it's kind of like this copycat culture. So what type of innovation could come out of China? But once you're there, it's a completely different game. So I'm curious about your observation of that. You coming in from a Western European culture of innovation into China. What was that like?
Yeah, so maybe first, let me just say one thing about the copycat narrative.
Yes,
So
please.
this is indeed still the dominant narrative, whether that's in the US, in Europe, and probably for Israel that goes the same. I would argue, from being here 2.5 years, working with hundreds of Chinese startups and also corporations, this is totally a notion of the past.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at China, I think the best way to understand this country, of course, from the 1920s until now, the country has seen an incredible rise of middle class, an incredible increase in economic power, and this primarily was driven, obviously, by a manufacturing burst. At the same time, because of this quick economic development, wages have been increasing, making China no longer the cheapest factory of the world, and you see more and more manufacturing is moving out of China towards, for example, countries like Vietnam.
Right.
And the Chinese government are very well aware of this. So already since the 2000s, or maybe even before, China has started to make the shift away from a manufacturing copycat economy towards an innovation-driven economy. And if you look at what the country is doing today, where all the investment is going, where all the companies want to go, it's all innovation-driven, away from copy and paste, towards fundamental research, towards application research, and in some areas China is already leading. So if you look at facial recognition technology, if you look at smart city, if you look at anything that's 5G or IoT driven, China is very much leading. I'm personally not really agreeing with the copycat narrative. Now, where do we still have an edge in the West? For me, there's two things. On the one hand, we still have an edge when it comes to critical thinking. And this both goes for the way we run companies as well as the way we think about strategy. And we have an edge when it comes to design. So these are still the areas where I think we're stronger. However, I have no doubt that China will catch up in both much faster than most of us are aware of.
Yeah. Is there a difference between the way China innovates and the Western world innovates? I get the edge part of it, but like they had to go from copycat culture to an innovation driven culture. Have you noticed like any growing pains, things that they decided to do differently?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of very, very fundamental differences that we have been discovering in the last couple of years. And this is, for me, is actually one of the most interesting things of being in this role. I have become of the belief that typical Western innovation methodologies, so things like lean startup, customer development, design thinking, they don't really work in China.
Interesting. Okay.
And we can go a little bit deeper there if you want. So that would be one. The second thing I would say is if you look at the way we think about starting companies or doing innovation or doing any type of new product, the kind of golden rule in any Western country would be strategy is all about focus. So you need to pick a specific market, solve a very specific pain point, and then go after that and be laser focused and say no to many things.
Mm-hmm.
What I see in China very much is a more horizontal approach where companies are exploring many different markets, many different products all at the same time. And they expand in 20 different directions at the same time. And actually that can work here. And maybe the third thing, and of course all three factors are related, but I've noticed as well that the mindset of Chinese entrepreneurs is extremely pragmatic.
Mm-hmm.
And extremely short-term driven. Whenever you're trying to shape a collaboration, whenever you're trying to do a project, it's all about what do you have that will help me make money in the next 3 months. It's not so much about long-term, strategic-driven collaborations. It's much more short-term driven.
Okay, so let's go back to Xnode and you guys are in the middle of that. Your main business model is this inside out, outside in, right? China to the world and the world into China. How does that make your life of, cross-border venturing or innovation more difficult?
Yeah, so actually to some extent I would say maybe this even justifies our existence because we make use of this information asymmetry. We also make use of those cultural differences and we try to bridge those gaps. So to some extent we profit from it. Now, how does it make our life more difficult? I think specifically whenever we work 90% of our clients when it comes to the corporate part of our business are multinational companies, and very often they have the idea that they can use a blueprint from their headquarters of how innovation is done. They can use that blueprint in China. So we have a lot of education, a lot of discussion, and a lot of education that we need to do for them to understand that that's not going to work here. A Chinese entrepreneur is not interested to be offered a very structured 12 or 16-week acceleration process with a beautiful content being delivered. A Chinese entrepreneur only cares about one thing: can I put my brand on your brand on my deck, and can we get to a commercial agreement yesterday? So you need to structure these things very differently. So that's sometimes a struggle for us. Specifically when it comes to working with foreign entrepreneurs. So we work a lot with foreign companies, foreign scale-up companies, and we help them come into China. There, the same thing applies. So they very often think, we already have a product, we already have a market, we are already a business that's generating a lot of money. So China is going to be a piece of cake. We just need a couple of clients, and then we can crack the China market. And they completely underestimate complexity. Very often, your entire product needs to be changed. The way you segment the market is different. Your business model and your revenue model very often are different. You need to hire local people to do local sales. Everything is different. How to deal with the government, that's a totally different topic, obviously, here. So we need also there to do a lot of education. And typically, good entrepreneurs are a bit stubborn. Mm-hmm. So it always takes some time for them to acknowledge that ultimately we were right.
I like that. Okay, fair enough. So before we wrap up, I've got one more question. Do you have a few battle-tested tactics for successfully driving innovation with Chinese companies? Like you mentioned MNCs in China. What has been successful? What hasn't?
So specifically when it comes to corporate innovation, I think the core thing that I think is very often still sadly forgotten or misunderstood or not done properly is it's all about boundary conditions. You cannot make any type of specifically open innovation happen if the right boundary conditions are not in place. So what do I mean with that? If you're a multinational company and you want to work with startup companies, then that only works if, for example, you allow those startup companies to hold the intellectual property rights in case they might be developing something new as part of the collaboration. This only works if you have a specific new process in place when it comes to dealing with procurement. This only works if you accept that it will be impossible to quantify the potential return on investment for a specific business case. This only works if you understand that reintegrating startups into business units almost never works. And very often I find that many type of corporate startup collaboration or corporate innovation practices in general, the willingness is there, the budget is there, but the boundary conditions are not. And as a result, many of it fails, which is very sad. So my battle-tested tactic there is to demand that from clients, and otherwise to just say no to the project, because if you don't have those things in place, you're wasting everyone's time. There's never going to be any impact created. You're alienating employees. And ultimately, you get nothing done besides a beautiful show and a couple of nice pictures.
So you're saying that should be a prerequisite to any project that you're thinking of launching?
Yeah.
Gotcha. That's super insightful. Before we wrap up, how do people get to know more about HiTechXL, about Xnode, about yourself?
Yeah, so you can go to our website. So that's hitechxl.com, that's thexnode.com. Me personally, if people want to reach out to me, they can reach me on luuk.eliens@thexnode.com. That's luuk.eliens@thexnode.com, or via LinkedIn. You can just find my name, and I'm there. I'm not so active on any other social, so it needs to be LinkedIn or email for me.
Fair enough. I'll put all that in the show notes. Luuk, as always, pure pleasure. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I had a lot of fun. So hopefully it's useful to some of the people listening.
I hope you enjoyed this episode with Luuk Eliens. If you don't want to miss the next episode, just search for the School of Innovation on your favorite podcast platform and subscribe. Also, don't be shy and leave a review. Reviews make it easier for awesome people like yourself to find this podcast. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next week.